Thank you for tuning in to the sixth season of The Halfling and the Spaceman Journeys in Active Fandom. We're having great conversations with people that have turned their love of fandom into something creative. We are fans talking to fans.
And today we are super excited to be talking with Ted Smith, or Evil Ted, as he's known by his fans. Evil Ted worked in the movie industry doing visual effects, prop, and model making for 28 years. He's worked on many films and television shows, which you'll probably know, and he's known around the world for his YouTube tutorials teaching cosplayers how to make foam armor and props. Welcome, Ted.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Now,
Thank you for being here. It's quite an honor.
now, Ted, before we get
Uh,
started, there's an important question I got to ask you. Where is
Go on.
Evil Bill?
It is, it's so funny. I'll get a lot of comments about my name when it started. Um, there was something my friend Bill Duran, who also has a YouTube channel. I think it's called Punish Props. I think it's Punish Prop Academy now. And Bill was kind of the pioneer of the YouTube tutorials on teaching kids how to craft
Mhm.
with foam. And he was the one that gave me the idea. I saw his video. I'm like, what a great idea. So I started doing it. And I'm like, oh, I need a name for my channel. And I should have put, the thing is so funny is that most people would have put some thought into that, but I didn't. I was just kind of like, yeah. So I have a dear friend, his name was Ted, and and I met him, and when I came to California, and so the going joke was we were the two Teds, and he was my best friend, also named Ted, and we got lumped together. So it was like Ted A, Ted 1, Ted 2. And I said, no, 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 no. It's either good Ted or evil Ted. And everybody laughed, and it became like a nickname for me. And so in our circle of friends, I was known as Evil Ted. And so then all of a sudden I'm thinking, what should I call my YouTube channel? Oh, I know, the Evil Ted channel. Like it's like it was just kind of rolled off my tongue. It was kind of funny. And it has not like people like marketing would be like, that has nothing to do with crafting or foam. And like I know, but it was like it just became a brand. And the logo, there's an old magazine I used to read when I was a kid called Famous Monsters of Filmland. And it was the first kind of like horror sci-fi fandom magazine we could get as a kid in the 60s and 70s. Um,
Mhm.
and it had this great font, like Famous Monsters of Filmland, and that's the font I used for my Evil Ted logo. And I found out years later that the band Misfits, they took it as well too. So
Ah.
and they stole it first. So the Misfits stole that font first, and then they did it so quickly that when you look up that kind of font, it's called Misfit font.
Ooh.
Oh.
but but the long story short is that became my brand and my name, and it stuck. People loved it, and I think it's memorable. And it's kind of an oxymoron because when people meet me, they're like, "Dude, you're not evil at all." I'm like, "I know it's kind of a joke. Like I'm not truly evil. I'm the opposite of evil, but it's kind of funny though." So it just, and I'm really happy that people embraced it and really love it. And my shirts do really well. People love the t-shirts, so I
Oh,
sell those
yeah.
t-shirts on my website,
Okay.
A good merch plug.
Okay.
eviltedsmith.com.
Uh, well, I actually kind of envisioned that it came from the second Bill and Ted's movie, with
Mm,
the evil Ted and the evil Bill robots.
Excellent.
I just kind of thought,
yep.
okay, well, he's a builder, so maybe that's where he got it from.
I get people thinking, yeah, I had people, I love that film. People think of it also as Evil Dead, like the movie
Hmm.
Evil Dead. And Evil Dead had a very similar font. And so people just thought it was a nod to
Ah.
Evil Dead and Evil Ted. And I tell people, whatever it is that you think it is, embrace it. I think it's far more exciting. Seriously, because it's far more exciting than what I did. Like it's just was my friend, and then we just had nicknames, and that's the whole lore of what Evil Ted really meant. Was like I like that people had different stories, and said, yeah, stick with that because it's far more interesting than mine. So,
Yeah. Well, okay.
but
Now,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, no, no. I was just going to say, okay, now that we have covered the evil bit and we've determined that you are, in fact, not evil, um, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
I was a boy from the Midwest. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. And my form of escape was television and movies. And I always liked genre stuff. And like, I mean, like fantasy and stuff. I had friends that were really into D&D. And I was into D&D when it was like marked as the sign of the devil. Because
Yeah.
as a kid growing up, as a kid growing in the Midwest, people don't realize this, but D&D, when it came out in the 70s, it's a board. It was like this whole role playing thing with RPG. The guys that invented it, the game and how it was designed was genius. Like boards and maps and abilities and stuff. When rolling to the dice, it makes it a little more organic. But at the time, being in a very very religious area in St. Louis, Missouri, they missed the point. Was it was just a fun game, and so all the local religious people really started attacking, like, oh, it's a sign of the devil. And us being youngers, we embraced it, thought it was very funny. And it took, people don't realize that, like, it was such a thing that they made a movie, a made for TV movie. Um, I think it
Mazes
was,
and
it
Monsters.
was, that's it. And it had Tom
Yeah.
Hanks, a very young Tom Hanks. And he
Yeah.
played a kid who couldn't separate reality from the game. It was like so over the top, ridiculously dramatic. But that was it. That was the era we lived in. So that game was so controversial that they made a TV show about a kid who loses connection with reality. I'm like, are you kidding me? But the fact that it was Tom Hanks is just amazing. So
Hey, I remember that movie. My mom freaked out when she saw it, and
yeah, exactly. It did everybody.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
love.
It's the whole satanic panic thing. I mean, that,
Right.
people have heard that phrase, but unless you've actually experienced it and been in on that, it's hard to envision. But you had, I mean, there was what uh what was the group?
Bothered about Dungeons and Dragons.
Bad, bothered about Dungeons and Dragons. Uh, yeah, I mean, it
Oh
was a
God, so great.
widespread thing.
Yep,
Uh,
but being out there, you're absolutely right. So what that did for me was I was a very small circle of friends, and I would make stuff. And I had a friend who had they put it out, was the Star Trek manual.
Mm-hmm.
It was a book, a hardbound book, and it was called the Star Trek Federation Manual or whatever it was. And it was great. It was this beautiful hardbound book that they put out, and it was done as legitly like it was done like as if you got in the Federation. Here's your manual. So through the manual, it had blueprints of the Enterprise and how things work and command, who's in charge of what, and officers. And in there, they had blueprints of the tricorder, the phaser. And I was like, oh my God. And they actually had at full size.
mhm.
So I borrowed my friend, I made a Xerox copy of it, and I used it to make patterns. And I made my first prop I used because when I was a kid, we all had was poster board. I lived in St. Louis. I didn't have access to plastics and I wasn't really good with wood tools yet. So I went out and got poster board, and I made phaser replicas. And that was my first prop. And I made a tricorder that would open, and that was the start of me just building stuff. And I was surrounded by friends like, oh my God, it's amazing. And we started crafting together. But the fact of doing that for a living was so off the spectrum for me as a kid, because I wasn't exposed to the entertainment industry. I lived in the Midwest.
Mhm.
And so throughout the years, I made circles of friends, and I had, we made things together and stuff. And as I got older, I befriended this guy named Wyatt Weed. And Wyatt lived in South City, and I just recently moved out there. I moved out of my house with my parents. I had my own apartment, and I was like living on my own. And he lived not too far from me, so we met and hung out and did stuff together. Long story short, though, him and his wife separated. They divorced. Like things were going well in this relationship. He's like, I'm out of here, man. So I'm like, okay. and so he said, "Hey, can I crash on your couch for a couple of days?" Because he got kicked out of his house. So he's living with me, and he turns to me and goes, "I'm gonna go to California and pursue my dreams and work in the movies." I'm like, "Yeah, buddy, good luck." So, right? Like, so he literally takes his entire life, loads into like a little car, which wasn't much, and he drives off. And at the time, I worked for Sears. I worked for the photography department. I worked at Sears as a portrait studio, and had a little cubicle job and had an in and out basket and would do paperwork. And a week later, I get a phone call from him saying, "Hey, Ted, I'm working on this low budget zombie movie, and the stuff they're doing, man, is like not even good as what you could do. You could do so much better." And I was like, "Wait, what?" So he leaves, and within a week, he's working on a movie, and that was it. That was it. That's all I need to hear. So I literally gave my 30-day notice at my work. Again, this is 1989. Like a lunatic. I had a job, a 401k, I had security, insurance, and I was like, nope. I gave my 30-day notice. I never can tell my parents. They were not thrilled about it at all. But I literally just did the same thing he did. I packed everything up in a U-Haul truck, and my friend Tom came out with me to help me drive, and we just drove, and I hit the ground running, and that's how I got started. That was, I look back on that, and I think ignorance is bliss, because having that no fear mentality, like I would never do anything like that now in a million years. But being 25 and just the idea, you throw fear to the wind. I just got an apartment next to my friend, and I just started knocking on doors. It's like, it was crazy, but yeah, it, and started getting jobs. My very first show was Miracle Landing. It was a made for TV movie. Had Connie Selica in it, and it was about the Air Aloha tragedy. Like I don't know if you guys know about this. There was an airlines. It was flying to Hawaii, and the top of the plane peeled open like a banana peel. That's like,
I
Oh,
remember that.
oh,
Yes.
yeah,
yes. And that we made a TV
yeah.
movie about that. So we had to redo all the steps of effects and miniatures. So that's how I got started. That's my start.
Talking about getting started in the deep end.
Wow. Uh, well, it's funny how, you were saying that you wouldn't think about doing something like that now, but but I think it's a universal thing that as we get older, we become more risk aversive, you know,
Mhm.
because you could look back on things that you did when you were a kid, and you're like, oh,
Right.
there is no way I
Oh,
would do that now. What
oh,
was I thinking?
the spaceman's not as bold as he was 10 years ago. So
Right. Well, yeah, that too.
But you're right. There's a sense of youth, and that's one I try to tell people when I go to conventions or people. I used to get in the beginning when I started my YouTube channel. People found out I worked in the movie industry. Everybody would come to me and say, "I want to work in the industry. I want to work in the movie business. Like, how'd you get into it?" Da, da, da. And I always tell them, it's like, be a big fish in a small pond first. Like, I can't. Like, I used to tell people, get your portfolio together, pack your bags. But the way the economy is right now, I have a family. I have two daughters, and my
mhm.
wife. My oldest would love nothing more than to move out. They would love to have their own place, but
Hmm.
they went looking apartment shopping in California, and they couldn't. They found a small box, like a little studio apartment, that's about the same size of her bedroom for like $2,000 a month.
Mm.
And she's like, that's absurd. And I said, I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry. It's like kids nowadays can't even. The only way to do it, you'd have to get like 3 or 4 roommates to pull together to rent a house.
Oh.
Just to make a monthly. Yeah, it's insane. So I always tell people, before you make that big move, look at your community, look at your neighborhood, look at your local theaters, look at friends, independent people making like little independent films, or college students making film projects. Start making props or costumes for your friends. Just start honing your skills. Start building for you, but not just building for you. Start building for other people. Start learning how to work with other people, and start improving your skill set. Like, it's good that you have a craft set, but keep building. The more you build, the better you get. And that's and like and just the biggest thing is learning to work with other people. When I was young, I we had jobs, and each of us had specific jobs, but like when you're on a production or a show, you're like a team, and you all have to work together, and it's just like it's really humbling, and to work with people and on a production, it's kind of like you build this camaraderie, and it's a good skill set. But I'm just telling people, like, work in your neighborhood and work your skill set up, and you might find. As a matter of fact, I went to a convention called MegaCon. I was at MegaCon, and I had a booth, and people were coming up and meeting me and taking pictures and stuff. And I kicked myself in the butt because this young woman came up to me, and I kicked myself in the butt for not getting her name or her email, Instagram. But she just said, "Hey, Ted, I have a job because of you." And I was like, "Excuse me?"
Aw.
Uh, she said, "I worked in school at college," and she was like doing costuming and stuff like that. And she really saw my videos about foam crafting. So she started making armor, and she was in a theater department, and the theater people were like, "Hey, we were going to do this play we want to do, but there's a lot of armor in it that we can't afford. So we're going to probably we're going to probably have to do stuff with fabric or whatever." And she raised her hand and said, "Hey, wait a minute. Like, I can do that." Like, excuse me? She's like, "Yeah, I can actually make." So she took stuff that she made from home, showed it to them. They said, "Great." I think they commissioned her to do it. So she showed up with suits of armor, and their minds were blown. So in the theater department, they hired her as a costumer. So when she was in school, she actually got a job from that. And now she's this costumer for a theater production in Florida. And they're like, "Oh my God," they loved everything she did, and started throwing more things at her. And so she said, she goes, "I want to thank you for that." So if she's listening, please reach out to me, because I like, that was such a great success story for me to hear. And I'm sure there's other ones out there, but it was just so great that she didn't ask for anything. I didn't buy anything. I didn't sign anything for her. She just came up to tell me that. She was like, "Hey,
Wow.
I got a job because of you, and I just wanted to thank you." So she must
Yeah.
be somewhere in Florida. But anyway, I was like,
Yeah.
it meant the world to me.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. That's the ultimate validation from for what you do, and it's great to get that feedback and kind of puff yourself up a little bit. You know.
Yeah, because I just like that people, like I said, but it's the idea of, like, when people write to me, go, "Hey, like, how do you go about doing this?" I'm like, "Well, like, I always think it's funny because in my videos, I build just things that I want to build, like things that I'm passionate about. And people write to me this email, "Hey, you should do this." And I'm like, "No, you should do that." Like, it's like my passion is for what I'm making, and you want me to have the same passion for what you're making, and I don't. But with my videos, I'm trying to teach people is that, "Hey, Ted, you should do a video on making this thing that I want." I'm like, "No, no, no. These videos are for the skill set to show you how you go about making it for yourself." Because that's what it is. It's about making your own
Hmm.
stuff. So
Yeah.
some people want to have their hands held through.
Well, that's what we're doing. We're trying to expose people to all the different cool creative things that you can do and be inspired by your nerdy fandom side. We're builders, makers, model makers, cosplayers,
Mhm.
authors, artists. We talk to a wide gamut of people from lots of different backgrounds. So
And they all have their stories and of their journeys and how they got to be where they are, and and it we hope that our listeners are inspired. That's what
Oh,
we want.
excellent.
We want to inspire and entertain, and if you hear people who've maybe struggled through some things to get where they are,
Right.
that's good for people to hear that. Okay, I'm at this roadblock, or I'm at this obstacle, but I can get through it.
and you're not alone.
If this person
Right.
can do it, I can do it. Yeah.
The hardest thing, the hardest thing to do is start. I always tell people, starting is half the battle, because there's a great story that somebody, guys, like a martial artist, like he told the story. He goes, he has two belts. There's a white belt and a black belt. He said, which one do you think is the hardest to get? And people like raise their hand and go, the black belt. And he's like, no, it's the white belt, because it started. He started. The black belt is just somebody who stuck to it. That's the difference. A
Yep.
white belt is somebody who starts. The black belt's because he stuck to it. He's like, that's the biggest battle. And I thought, my God, even when I heard that, I thought that's the greatest analogy. Is like,
Yeah.
people want to get into cosplay and they're super intimidated. I always tell them, man, it's starting. And here's the thing. The reason people don't want to start, because they have this, they beat themselves up because they want everything to be perfect the first time. I'm telling you right now, it's not going to be perfect the first time. It's going to look like garbage, and you know it, but you got to power through it, because it is, it's the thing of like, it's, when you see a costume on somebody, trust me, they're not, we see pictures of these amazing cosplayers. They're not posting pictures of their failures. They're posting pictures of their finished work that took them 6 or 7 months to do. It's like,
Yep.
don't judge yourself on that, because that's ridiculous. It's like, they did not post their crappy work when they started. It's like, so that's the thing you have to understand. It's like, you have to struggle. And I used to get people like, oh, I don't want to waste any foam. You're going to waste foam. It's going to happen. That's why you go to the Harbor Freight and you buy the cheapest foam known possible, and you fail with that stuff first. And then once you get good enough and you like what you're doing, or you make a good pattern, then you can spend the money on the good foam. But just buy
Mhm.
cheap foam, craft knife, a cutting mat. You don't need much. So anyway, I'm sorry. I could do this for hours.
No, no, no. I have to say that it matches our experience. If you go back and listen to the first season of The Halfling and the Spaceman,
Oh, Lord.
it was not some of our best work, but it's okay.
Yeah, exactly. You got to push it. You ready for this? I can't watch my old videos.
Yeah.
I literally can't watch them. No, it's like staring into the sun. I'm like, oh, I can look away, because there's things that I see, like the audio, the quality. And I had my friend Bill Duran was like, he said, yeah, he goes, but the content's good, Ted. He's like, your audio and your camera stuff, it'll improve over the years. You'll get better. And he did. He's right. I got really good at it. I'm better at it now than I was before. It's just that you're absolutely right. In the beginning, I was just like, ugh, but I kept at it. That's the key. You
Mhm.
got to keep at it. Just stick to it.
That's the thing. Just keep on keeping on.
So, Ted, have you always wanted to do costume, or did you want to do just effects in general?
It's good. You know, that's a great question. Thank you. When I started, I had this illusion that I was going to be a makeup artist. Um, I was, I always crafted and made stuff at home as a kid. I would make cardboard boxes and turn them into spaceships and things. I always had a crafting ability to me. And then I would see stuff like Rick Baker and, and Tom Savini, these makeup artists. And there was a book that came out by Tom Savini called Grand Illusions. I think he ended up renaming it Bizarro or something. But it was a book full of all his techniques of how he made makeup and monster and horror movies, really simple techniques. So I got it and started playing with it and wowing my friends with some simple techniques.
Mhm.
And so when I came to California, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to meet people. So I worked on a show with a bunch of makeup artists, and there's a young man by the name of Eddie Yang who was 17 years old standing next to me. And I'd watched him take a life cast of an actor and slap clay on it and shaped something up in one day with his hands. And by the time the day was over, he had something so roughed out. It was amazing. And I said, that would have taken me a week, if not, like, that would take me forever. It made me realize I am not there yet. I was like, here's a kid who's 17 years old. This is my competition. There is no way I'm going to be able to keep up with this guy. And it kind of really made me realize I had to regain my my bearings of what I wanted to do. But I was still, but the guys at the shop were like, weren't really like fabricators or like model makers, or like they were more sculptors and makeup guys. So in the show, there's this thing called the Guyver unit that had to, the show I was working on, it's called the Guyver. And there's this device in the show that had to move and open. And the director, Steve, was like, hey, you're a model maker. Like, I want this to do this. And I'm like, oh, and he was right. I had the brain working to figure out how to rig this thing up to do certain things. Like he wanted to open up and have tentacles come out. And so
Mm-hmm.
that challenge was great because I finally realized that was my strong set. I was good at that. And shortly after that show wrapped, I started getting more model work. So I'd say almost the first 7 years of my career in California, I was a model maker. So I did that. And I loved it. So I did models and built miniatures because guys, you have to understand, this was before CG. So back in the 90s, if you wanted a building to blow up or a bridge to collapse with a car on it, they usually did it with miniatures. And so that
Mm-hmm.
was how everything was done. And we did everything from commercials to movies, TV shows. And so I was working a lot as a model maker. And I could see the writing on the wall because I was doing Fifth Element. We worked on Fifth Element. I was on that for 7 months. And then when that wrapped, I went on to Titanic. I worked on that for a little bit, about 4 months on that. And seeing the technology, and they were doing like Godzilla at the time, and was it Dante's uh, Peak and Volcano? And there's a lot of physical,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of digital at the same time. And they're making digital, like even on Fifth Element. People don't realize this. New York City is a miniature. We did the flying cab was a model. There's tons of models, but they just did digital stuff in the background. And it looks good. And I said, that background is going to become foreground soon. They're going to start making it better. And sure enough, within a couple of years, so I saw that coming, and I'm like, I'm going to be losing work here soon. So I started getting into costuming and prop making, and I went on tour with Rob Zombie. Rob Zombie is a rock musician, and I made some costume stuff for some music videos. And
Mm-hmm.
he liked the stuff I did for the music video, and he was like, "Hey, I would like to have some stuff built for my tour. Would you be up for that?" I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I built stuff for his tour. So this is where I switched gears. I got out of model making, started making foam costumes and props for the Rob Zombie tour. And I had enough work from doing that I had something to show. So when the tour was over, I got hired to work at K&B, which was an effects house. And I did some foam fabricating for them, for Little Nicky. We did uh, Robert Rodriguez Spy Kids. I did Xena Warrior Princess, and a lot of foam fabricating. And then from that, um, went from foam fabricating and then switched over to prop making. So it was like 3 or 4 years of costuming, first model making, then costuming. But I switched gears into prop making. And then when I found this place called Hand Prop Room, which is a prop house out here in California, it's a rental house, but they had a fabrication department. And so I fell into that place, and I was there for 15 years. So
Wow.
that in a nutshell is my career in the fabric, because I just kept changing gears. It's like that thing of like, it's the same skill set. You just have to learn how to apply it in different mediums. Like that's when I always teach people about foam fabricating. I have friends who work in leather. They're leather workers. And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't work in foam. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's the same thing. It's just the material is more expensive and harder. Um, but it's that thing of just grasping the idea of working with a different material. But yeah, it's a great question because that's exactly what I did. I started off with one thing and just kept shifting to where the work was. And I won't lie, with model making, I did it for so long, I was really burned out. I was so burned out. I was about to leave. I was like, I wanted to do something different. I was about to quit the industry and do something else. I was really burned out. And that's when I kind of got out of that and got into the costume stuff and then got into prop making. So I was able to change gears because model prop making is kind of like model making, but 1-to-1 scale
Yeah.
opposed to miniatures. So
I like that. What model railroad do you have? 1-to-1,
yeah, full size.
Well,
full size. Yes, that's right. I've got it. It's full size team engine in my backyard.
so having been into all these different forms of, of creating, I'm not even sure what word to really use for this.
They call us fabricators in the industry. We're fabricators.
Fabricators, but so I guess that's just the general term for everything that you have done along the way. do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite um, form that you have enjoyed working with more than others? For
Yes.
instance, have you enjoyed, you mentioned getting kind of burned out on the model building, but
Mhm.
you did it for so long. You had to have enjoyed it, but was there something else that you've enjoyed more, or do you think looking
Yes.
back that that's the thing you did enjoy the most or have enjoyed the most?
Y- Yeah. What I enjoyed the most, I like when I bottle making, what it was is what was the repetitiveness of there was no creativity to it to a degree. Like when you're working on a show, you made a miniature dumpster. Like there's like they're doing stuff in this alley. Hey, we need miniature dumpsters and garbage cans, and so you had to make them, and you had to make them from scratch. And so you would do it, but you're not doing something different, creative. You're making something in reality, but just making it smaller. And there's some people that love it, and to me, it was repetitive, and I got really bored of it quickly. Um, and I worked at the prop house too, and the prop house was great for a while too. I love that. And making props for TV shows. And we sometimes we get to do something creative, but most of the time it was just making rubber guns and rubber hammers and rubber axes and stuff, or some sci-fi weapons occasionally. But the thing that I fell in love with is foam fabricating, like making a helmet, like a space helmet, but making it out of foam, making a suit of armor, but making it out of foam. Is like making weapons that look dangerous and scary, but they're all made out of foam. And that was something I really fell in love with, of taking that medium of just something like craft foam and pushing it to the limit to make it look like it's anything. Make it look like it's wood, make it look like it's metal, make it look like it's like carbon fiber. Like it was just this, and it's the freedom you have with foam. It's it's not expensive. It's readily available everywhere, and you don't need to spend tons of money buying supplies. The movie industry, uh, when I worked in it as a kid, I loved it. And but the thing would always would break my heart was I wanted to make things. I would learn and work with. When you're working on a show, it's not your money; it's somebody else's. So you
Mm-hmm.
buy the silicone and the casting resin and all that stuff. But when you're done and you want to make something for yourself, you start to find out, because the shops buy all the supplies for us. But when you're outside the shop, you have to buy, you start finding out what things cost. You're like, holy cow. Like for a gallon, like a gallon of silicone is like $500. You're like, oh my, like it gets to a point where like, so having that energy to build something. And then when I started seeing cosplay people, my first cosplayer that I followed, okay, I'm going to date myself, guys. Remember that thing called MySpace? I was on MySpace, and there was a young girl named Yaya Han. And this is before Yaya Han was the Yaya Han. Yaya Han's a big cosplay entrepreneur by today's standards, but in the beginning, she was just a cosplayer on MySpace. And I was a huge fan of her, but I became friends with her husband, and we just started chatting. And I would see all these cosplayers through her MySpace page. I'm like, what's this? These kids are making, what is it that, what are they using? Like, what is this? And I was introduced to floor mats, like all the floor mat foam the kids were
Mm-hmm.
using. I'm like, oh, those little rascals, they're just buying floor mats. And like, so I was so like, what they say, you can't see the forest because of the trees. Like, it was like, oh my God, that's so amazing. Like these kids were using stuff you could get at hardware stores. And I started going to Harbor Freight, and I started doing the same thing, experimenting, taking my abilities of building an industry, but applying it to the foam. So I was able to learn some stuff too. And as I started getting into it and I started to find people making channels, I thought, wait, I have these ideas and techniques. Let me just share them with them. So I want to take this time to thank the cosplay community for saving my creativity in my life and my enjoyment, because working in the industry is fun, but it does become a job, and it is exhausting, and it's sometimes soul crushing to work on stuff and have it not get used, or you build something and you get paid, but they take it and don't even say thank you. It just gets to be a point where it's like, it gets to be a lot. And when I got into cosplay, I started teaching people. They're like, oh my God, thank you, Ted. And I would, they were so appreciative of what I was doing that it made it fun again. So now I really enjoy building So to answer your question, my favorite thing to do is build cosplay and make things out of foam and teach people. That is my all-time favorite thing to do. So now that I'm working in the industry and got back into it, I do it for money, but my true passion and love is cosplay and making armor and costumes and prop out of foam. That's my all-time favorite thing.
That is awesome. So, what was the first costume that you built out of foam?
Ooh, um, I've had random pieces. I'm trying to think the thing I like the most. I built stuff for like my friends and I built stuff is like with upholstery foam costumes, kind of wacky costumes, really done and dirty. But I think the most elaborate thing I really put my energy into was a Vampire Hunter D. It's an anime. It was a
Mm-hmm.
feature length
Oh
film.
yeah.
Vampire Hunter, yeah, Vampire Hunter D was actually an animated series, I think in the
Mm-hmm.
80s, and then they made a feature film also in the 80s it came out, and then they made a newer one called Bloodlust, Vampire D Bloodlust, and they really changed D's look. He had the black, he had the big black hat, and the black cape and the armor, and I just fell in love with it. And again, that show's been around for so long that my brain, I was like, oh yeah, I'll get vacuum form plastic and I'll sculpt it and make a mold, and then like it's like I made it to where it's next to be impossible to do. And all of a sudden one day I started my Twitch channel. It was Twitch, the Twitch channel, the creative thing started this like whole creative community. And I started a channel. I thought, what should I do? Oh no, I'll build this costume on my live stream. So I built Vampire Hunter D, and that was my first one. And I tell you what, I struggled a lot. It was like you said, like things that I built and I wasn't happy with, and I rebuilt, but that was a real challenge for me. I love that costume. That was my first real full blown costume, and I was so obsessed with it that the cape I know for a fact I couldn't make. It had this beautiful cape with gold lining in it. So I
Mm-hmm.
have a friend, Kit Quinn, who's is a seamstress, and I reached out to her and said, "Hey, I want this cape. What would it cost?" So I paid her to make. So and she came and she measured me and she said, all right, if you want it, here's what you got to get. You got to get it. So she made me get all the material, what we needed. And I picked up for her and she made this magnificent cape that's beautiful and it's heavy and it flows. And so, but that's another thing I learned, that I made my costume so big, I can't travel with it. So
Mm-hmm.
when making a costume, for all you cosplayers out there, there's costumes that are travel friendly and some that are not. And Vampire Hunter D, his hat's so big and his chest so big, I couldn't even put him in a foot locker. So there's really no way to travel. So I only wear it at local cons in LA. But
Mm-hmm.
I've learned that when you make costumes, you got to make them. If you want to take them, make sure you make them to travel. So I went a little nuts. It got too big. So
Good advice. Good
It's good advice for whatever you do. It's like,
advice.
yeah, a couple of years ago, we were packing up the entire studio and taking them to conventions. Now we just take a mic and maybe a camera and one light.
there you go. Once you start
Yeah.
traveling with stuff, it makes you realize, yep, I understand that completely. I have a foot locker, and if I want to bring things, it's so funny. There's weapons I was making. I realized I started measuring the foot locker. I said, "Oh my god, this! I wanted to make this. I had this flamethrower from Aliens, and to get the foot locker, I had to have both the ends come off. So I made them removable when I made it, so I could actually put it in a foot locker. Because otherwise, I wouldn't be able to travel with it. So you have to make things break
Mhm.
apart, which is essential in cosplay. Making things come apart, people. PVC pipe, magnets. Trust me. Do yourself a favor. Don't kill yourself.
There's a reason they always have to assemble a sniper rifle in movies. It's because
Right?
those things have to pack away.
Yeah, you got to put it in your backpack.
Uh, well, okay. This is just kind of a fun off the wall question, but I'm guessing that you probably love Halloween. Uh, yes or no?
Here's the thing with Halloween. It's it doesn't it doesn't um I dress up all the time. So it became this thing that where I used to when I was young, when I was younger, I loved it. And as I got older, I'm like, my career is dressing up, like, and doing
Yeah,
costumes. And so I do it 24/7. So Halloween is fun, but it's just another day. And I was
yeah,
I won't lie, if my kids were more into it, I'd probably be into it. But they're at that age, they're in their 20s now. So it's kind of like, like They don't really get dressed up or go out, but I've discovered that I don't go to parties or anything. I'm married. I got kids. I don't need to go out and party. But I did discover my local neighborhood um, really goes nuts. It's really nice that my neighborhood I live in, downtown Los Angeles, there's families and kids, so they do their houses up. So I just figured, hey, when Halloween comes around, I just go trick or treating. So I just kind of like take a costume I have that I think is worth showing and put it on and go do some trick
Mhm.
or treating. So so when Halloween comes around, I try to decorate the house up a little bit, but mostly I just walk and do trick or treat in my neighborhood. So that's what I do.
Uh,
That's a good question though. Thank you.
well, it makes sense. Like you said, pretty much it's just another day that you're dressing up. I mean, so that makes sense when you think about
It's kind of
it.
like me. I don't want to work on computers when I get off work. I want to do this.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
to support you on that, what happened there is that for me, you're absolutely right. That was with the prop house. When I was at the prop house for 15 years, I didn't do any creative, like I worked like 8 hours a day at the prop house. So when I had free time, the last thing I did was build stuff. So my creativity of building for myself just went out the window.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing. So that's why when getting away from work is more freeing, like I've been on this job I wrapped on, and I'm so happy now that I'm off because I can start making stuff again. So this illusion that I'm gonna work at a job full time and then come home and work on stuff is delusional. I always say I'm gonna do it. I never do.
Yeah,
It's too
I would
taxing. I
totally
can't do it.
relate. Totally relate.
We definitely can. We definitely can.
Uh, well, Spaceman,
Oh, okay.
you
Time for the spaceman.
it is time for this.
Time for the spaceman. So, what has been the most challenging builds so far of all the things, not just costumes, but miniatures, makeup, all of it?
It's funny because every job we do, there's always a bit of a challenge because people don't understand when studios go, hey, we want this. Okay, they're wanting something usually has never been done before. So back in the old days, in like the 80s and roughly 90s, they had this thing called R&D, which is research and development. And
Hmm.
Rick Baker in shops, they used to get like a year. Like I know my friends worked on Gremlins. They made Gremlins 2, the sequel.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And that movie had a year of development. Like they had a year to figure out how they're going to do things. And they went from making full-size Gremlin costumes. So that R&D era is gone. They don't do that anymore. It's like you get months, if not weeks, to build something. And we had this job we were working on of doing something that hasn't been done before. And I can't go into details because it's a thing we in the movie industry called NDAs, which is
Hmm.
Hmm.
non-disclosure agreements, means you can't talk
Yeah,
about it. So
right.
we had something we had to build, and we'd never done anything. We had a general idea how it was going to work, and so we did R&D it. So everything has a little bit of a challenge. I'm trying to think of the most difficult thing. Um, I think, oh wow, it's difficult. I mean, they all have a bit of their challenge, but I did this movie. It was stressful but fun at the same time. It was difficult, and it was for a movie. It was Ricky Gervais. It was a Ricky Gervais movie, and he was seeing. It's kind of a comedy version of Sixth Sense, um, where he sees dead people, and so he ignores them and tries to escape from them. And so, um, oh my god, the title's on the tip of my tongue. But in the movie, he has a kind of falls for this girl who works at the museum. I think they shot this thing in New York, and so in the movie, she's working on a mummy, like an actual a mummy from like ancient Egyptian times or something like that. So
Hmm.
she works at the museum. So she has this she has this mummy in front of her. So the prop department called us and said, "Hey, we need to make a mummy corpse. We need a body corpse." So my boss is like, "Hey, yeah," because he knew that I have kind of worked a little bit in makeup and fabrications. Like, we need this mummy. I said, "Okay, cool. I need an examination skeleton and some pantyhose and stuff." So I made a list of supplies of what I need, and they gave me a week. I had like about a week to build this. So it was actually a full size examination skeleton I covered with pantyhose to create skin. I just put pantyhose over it for skin, and I'd use tissue paper and liquid latex and rubber and cotton to make the wrinkles and stuff. And we had a picture of Too Uncommon. And so I had the picture as a reference to look at. So I matched this thing. And of course, my boss is like, how's that mummy coming? Let's go, go, go. So I do it. I finish it all up. We get it done. And it was stressful, but I was really, really happy with it. I loved it. It was all done. We put it in a body bag. We zipped it up, shipped it to New York. And that was it. And I was like, woo, that was so stressful. So time passes, and I finally realized, like, hey, I haven't heard anything about that mummy. Did they get it? So I go to my boss and tap on his door. And I said, hey, did they ever get the mummy? And he looked at me and goes, oh, I didn't tell you? I'm like, no. He goes, sit down. So I go in the office, I sit down,
Uh-oh.
and he says, when they were in New York, they were on set and they were using a real museum. So to shoot the movie, they thought, hey, it'd be more legit to have it at an actual museum. So they use the actual museum. They get there, they have the crate, they pop it open, and they had the body bag. They pull the body bag out, they unzip it, they expose the mummy, and the museum couriers that worked there went like this. And they put their hands to their faces, like, oh my God. And they froze. And if I looked at them, like, what's wrong? And they go, oh my God. And they walked up on my mummy and they looked at it and said, if we did not know this was fake, we would think this is real.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God. So they were so floored. The prop master like gets pats on the back, and then the production's like, this is amazing. And they shake his hands. This is amazing. It's amazing. So they give all this praise to the prop master. And then they call my boss, Lonnie, and they give him all these praise. Hey, we got that. It looks amazing, blah, blah, blah. And everybody's all patting each other on the back. And through that entire thing, the one person that never got mentioned once was me.
Oh, wow.
The
Oh,
guy
my
that
gosh.
made it. I have no
Ah.
screen credit. I got nothing for that. So that's a little
Wow.
taste of Hollywood. But that was a really fun, stressful job. And I love the fact that it's just, and this is the job I work at. You make stuff, out the door it goes, you never hear about it again. And the only reason I knew about it is I had to ask. But most of the time we just build stuff in the shop, we ship it to set. And then there's always a joke I play with my family. We'll be sitting back on the couch watching something, and all of a sudden I'll perp, oh, I made that. And my family will start laughing, like, what? Like we'll be watching some movie and there'll be some scene where somebody grabs something out of a cabinet or a oracle or a goblet and something. I start laughing and go, oh, I made that. And my wife is always like, how do you not know that you work? I said, no, because when I worked on these jobs, I get job numbers. They never gave us the titles of the shows we were working on. So for 15 years at the prop house, I would just make stuff with a job number attached to it. So we keep track of our hours. So I would say, oh, I put my hours on this job and I put hours on this job. So everything was a series of numbers, and we ship them out. The only thing I look back on, the only thing I recognized when I was building, I finally figured it out, because even the guys I was working for didn't recognize it, was I was making this giant cannon, like this kind of cartoon looking cannon. And I'm carving out a foam, we're putting wheels on it. And all of a sudden I realized, wait a minute. This is Gonzo's cannon from the Muppet Show. And they're like, what? I said, we're making Gonzo's cannon. So it turns out we work on the Muppet movie, and we were doing stuff for the Muppet movie. So I ended up making Gonzo's cannon. You know, so funny. Apparently, I think it's in the background. It's one of the movies I still have not seen because it's not free anywhere streaming. So I think you have to pay for it. But I built that, and I made chili dogs. There's a scene in the movie where the Muppets are eating chili dogs, and the Muppets, when they were making this movie, the recent Muppet movie they did, those are the actual Muppets from like the 70s and 80s. They didn't have the money to remake them, so they're actually the Muppets. So they're very carefully taken care of, and they keep the maintenance on them. And so they didn't want to get chili on these Muppets. So I had to make fake chili dogs. So when there's a scene with the Pink's hot dog, the Muppets are holding the hot dogs. I had to make fake looking chili dogs. And you actually go to my website, eviltedsmith.com, and there's I think there's an album called Props I Made. And in there you can find the picture of all the fake chili dogs and Gonzo's cannon, I think.
I hope nobody tried to eat one of those.
No, it was so funny. They were really obsessed about how good. I'm sure they're probably barely on the screen, but
Well, do you ever get people asking you, "Did you make this or did you make that?"
yeah, I
Like you're
do.
talking about
I
sitting
get
there with your family, and then you're saying, "I made this." Do you ever get the opposite where people are asking you, "Did you make this or that?"
I get mostly people, did you work on this? Like there's I meet younger people and I think their perception of time is always like a little bit off and always like, "Hey, did you work on Aliens?" I'm like, "No, I wish." Like Aliens was way before my time. That was like 84 when that thing came out and I was still living in St. Louis with my, in a little apartment in St. Louis. So it's like I
Mhm.
was still a youngster then. But there's I think people get tickled. Films that I worked on that became like classics is like The Fifth Element is a one I spent a lot of my time on. I worked on Titanic. I worked on Walking Dead. I worked on Spy Kids. I worked on Xena Warrior Princess. Um, there's like kind of cult status shows I worked on that people really love, which is great. Some film you never know if anybody's going to see it. But because I worked on films I think are terrible. Like I worked on Little Nicky, and I have a lot of friends and people are like, "Oh, I love that movie." I'm like, "Good. I'm glad somebody does because I saw it and thought it was terrible."
Little Nicky was peak Adam Sandler.
Yes, it was a wacky 5-minute bit turned into a feature-length film. So that's that's my take on it.
So, Ted, you've been involved with a lot of different media projects over your career. Is there one that you've enjoyed working on more than the others? And, related to that, do you prefer like one type of media, like movies, ever say music videos or television?
I love movies. I think television's kind of come and go so quickly. I love movies. I like working on movies. I think it's pretty hard to top the fun I had on The Guyver, which is low budget sci-fi movie with Mark Hamill who was in it, and it was my friend Steve Wang's directorial debut. He got to direct it. Well, he did a smaller film called Comfort Rascals, but his big budget film was The Guyver, and we were friends. And I got to work on that. And that being on that show was such a roller coaster because it was within a couple of years. It was like within a year, I moved out to L.A. And then within less than a year, I'm working on this feature length film, and I'm a monster in a costume, and we're on set, and there's actors and Mark Hamill on production, and it was just a roller coaster. And that was one of the magical times. And I can't think of a set I've ever been on where I had that much enthusiasm and energy. So the movie is called The Guyver. You guys can catch it on Tubi. I think it's on free. It's on Amazon right now, Amazon Prime. And you also can find it on Tubi. It's just called The Guyver. And that was my big breakout film. And I played two characters in that movie. I played the striker monster. J.J. Walker's in the movie. He turns into a monster. And I played his monster counterpart. And there's a gang member in the alley. That I have some nunchucks and I get beat up and thrown into a barrel. And that was me too. So, but yeah, that was so I got to work on it, build stuff, and play two characters in it. How do you beat that? That was like the best movie ever. So that was the most fun I ever worked on.
Uh,
And that was decades ago. And I never worked on anything that fun again.
So, folks, go out and catch the Guyver.
yeah,
Yeah, check it out. It's free on Tubi.
I've certainly heard of the movie, but I don't think we've
I don't
actually.
think we ever saw it.
Guys, honestly, you two would get a biggest kick out of it. It's such a campy, wacky, fun,
Oh yeah,
surreal thing. It's
yeah,
got tons, and for all the kids that they love the monsters. So,
Well, Halfling, I don't have plans tonight. What about you?
yeah.
All right. Sounds like we have
all
a
right,
date.
all right, fantastic. Watch the Guyver. I'm looking forward to
Uh,
hear what you think of it.
so at this point, we kind of start to talk about advice, in terms of what advice you might offer people listening out there. And you've already given some really good
Awesome advice.
advice.
Yes. Awesome.
Things like just start
Hmm.
slow and easy.
That's the hardest thing to
But
do. Yeah.
yeah, but what I mean, if somebody is seriously considering, pursuing a career in effects, or, as a fabricator of some sort,
Mhm.
what is the probably the best piece of advice you could offer.
It's just practice. People want people that are good. Having the passion and doing it's half the step. And now it's honing your craft. Get your craft good. People like, hey, I want to do this. Like, great. Like, I know people want to do a lot of things, but some people will pick up things faster than others. So you don't get jealous at somebody who can just do it faster than you. It's the thing is getting to the point to where you're good enough to where when you look at something, I always tell people, if you are building something and you look at it and you think it's terrible, that's actually good because you know what it's lacking. If you can look at something and know that something's wrong with it, that's half the battle. And then you keep working on it until it gets better. And then it gets to a certain point where it gets so good that you want to add more to it. But having that ability to know something's not good enough. Like when you guys started your show, you said in the beginning you were struggling and you can't, it's like you've learned so much more. The reason that you can go back and look at your old stuff knows that something's wrong with it. There's people out there that are so in their own head that they think they're great at everything they do. And everybody around them's like, no, that's not good. And they get all offensive about it. But the fact that you know that something's wrong with your work, that's the battle. Start honing that skill, get good at what you do, and get to the point where you're not just you think it's good, but have your friends think it's good or your family think it's good. Start showing people that, hey, that looks really cool. That looks really cool. Like hone that skill, because if you want somebody to hire you or get you for a job, they're going to hire people that are good. And they want to be, you're going to be good. So the thing is, whatever it is you're doing, just keep honing that craft and make it good. The desire to do something is half the battle. That's the start. But then having the skill set to stand up to it. Because everybody, I always tell people, there's an opportunity in your life where you're going to have a chance to put your foot in the door on something. Like there'll be an opportunity where somebody will say, hey, I'm looking for so-and-so, or do you know? And that's where you'll be able to raise your hand and say, wait, I do. And when that moment comes, you need to have something to show.
Mm-hmm.
And that opportunity doesn't come around often. So when it does, get ready for it. So that opportunity will happen, but you got to have something in your arsenal to show them. So like, oh, I really want to do this. Then make sure that you have something to show, have pictures, have images, and don't just show the picture of the finished product, show pictures of the thing as it's being built, show stages so it can prove that you that made it and talk about, and then they're going to ask you, how long did it take you to do that? So keeping track of your time, honing your skills, it's like that opportunity is going to come. You just got to be ready for it. And when I came out here to California, I did have some stuff, but I luckily, when I put my foot in the door and they said, oh, what can you do? I said, well, I can do this. And they just hired me on the notion that I told them I could do this. And luckily they had faith in me and I was able to get stuff. And once they started building stuff, it took me about 7 years to have a portfolio that I was comfortable to show somebody. So, and now I'm at the position where I have a portfolio, but nobody even asked to look at it because they knew who I am. But just hone that skill. Whatever it is you do, audio, video, music, writing, building costumes, and just have something to show when that day comes, where they'll ask if you know somebody.
Ted, you've talked a little bit about the different things in your career. If somebody did want to get into it, what do you think, other than having an established portfolio, are the must-haves that somebody who really wants to work in these types of elements in movies or music videos?
All right, you ready for this? This is really easy. Be a nice person. Be easy to work with. I can't tell you how far that goes to be respectful and do your job. Yes, sir. No, sir. Show up on time. Be polite. Be courteous. And even if you're good, be humble and keep it to yourself and hone your skills. And people say, hey, great work. You say thank you and just move on. It's like, I can't tell you how many jobs I worked on where there's guys, they're jerks. And it's amazing that these guys keep working. They do have a skill set and they have a talent, but I'll tell you what, when they start thinning the crew and they start running down on like budget and they start considering like keeping the budget on track, the first people they cut loose are the problem makers. And this goes in business and it drives me mad. And there's a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk who's a young entrepreneur. And he always says something. And he's like, hypothetical, like you have this girl, Karen, and Karen does great at sales and she makes tons of money, but Karen is not nice, and Karen causes conflict with people, and she's tension to other people and the rest of your employees. He goes, what do you do? And every corporation always thinks, oh, if it's a corporate, they go, oh, well, you know, Karen does a lot of stuff and she sells. No, what they should do, but they don't, is you should fire Karen. It doesn't matter if Karen does good sales, is what Karen is that she's terrible to everybody else, and she's like toxic. And what that does, it spreads like a virus through your entire company. So you had good people working there, but they're not vocal about their disgruntled or their feelings about her. They just leave. They just like quit the job or leave, or you lose them. And I can't tell you, every shop I work at, there's one or two of those, and they never take care of it. And the few people that do learn from that and get rid of the bad people, because bad people bring things down. So what I'm telling you guys, don't be one of those people. Show up, work hard, be humble, and be polite, and they will bring you back. Kindness goes a long, long way in this industry, because in this industry, there's a lot of divas and, you know, jerks and guys that think they're super talented, but they would do better to be nice. So be one of those people. And the nice and considerate you are, the more you work. That is my advice. Just be kind to people. It seems simple, but it's in this industry, it goes a long ways. Seriously, humble, polite, and show up and do your job and be nice.
Well, Janet, I think we need to fire the cat.
She's not nice. Is
Oh,
she?
she's not nice, and we're only a team of 3. It's me and her and the cat. So one of us has got to go. I think the cat.
But that's so true, not just of that industry, but any business.
Exactly. Anybody can tell a story, right? Any coffee shop, cafe, it doesn't matter. There's always one or two people that are just like, everybody just roll their eyes and they see them like, oh crap, so and so is working today, and they don't. And managers and business people, like I had a boss that worked at this prop house, and just there was people like they would never cut loose. Like, dude, these guys are the worst for this place. You got to. It's like, and they know it, but they just like, they don't care. They're just not involved. It's because they don't deal with them because they're the boss. You should always tell your bosses out there, pay attention to your environment and the people you work with. And if you see a problem, you need to talk to them and get it straightened out. If not, cut them loose.
Sounds
Yeah,
simple.
I know. I got to control
Sounds
myself. I can go on a tangent about that. So it's just there's toxic people, and you know who they are. Just stay away from them.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we talked about advice that you would give to others, but what's the best piece of advice that you have received from someone?
The best advice. The best advice I received. Yeah, there probably is. You know, I probably somebody probably did. I just adapted it and repeated it so much where I think it's my own now. Some good advice. Yeah, here's one. This is something simple for me. Is it's crazy, but when I was working and I was young, I was making money hand over fist. It's like it was a habit I would get into. Like I would be so thrifty. I was so great at living cheap, and I did it for so long that as soon as I got any money, I would celebrate a little bit. Like, yeah, I got money, I'm working. And I would just eat out or blow it or go to Disneyland or something like that. And it got to a point where, and I realized as I got married, I'm married now I have a wife and I have 2 kids and 4 cats. So not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 cats. It's your perspective. Like I look back at like all the money, it's like something as simple as eating out. Don't do it. Just make yourself a lunch. When you get up in the morning, make breakfast. Don't go through the drive-through and make a lunch for yourself. It's like you'll be amazed what you would save from not eating out. Eating out is so darn expensive. And it's just my advice to people. It's like when living, and especially, well, I live in California, so I'm super thirsty with stuff like these days. But in this economy, the way things are going with financial and money, just start making habits you can stretch with just cooking at home, making food. When I hooked up with my wife and I started learning how to cook, I got into it. And I look back and thought, my God, I was so young. My mother or my parents never taught me about cooking or taking care of myself. I was from that generation from the 80s where we were latchkey kids. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we used to have commercials that would show on TV going, "Hey, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your kids are?" I mean, there were ads
Yeah.
on television telling people of that generation, "Hey, keep an eye out for your kids." Because
Yeah.
like parents had children because they thought they were supposed to, not because they wanted us. So there was tons of kids that were just like unsupervised, unwanted. So we didn't have any kind of training. And I just think about this is such a different generation now, especially with TikTok, people are learning how to cook stuff. But that's one of my biggest things I wish I learned more about. But my advice is in taking care of yourself, start learning how to like, don't eat out, start cooking for yourself, making meals at home. If you get a job, eat breakfast at home, make a lunch, like so you can take with you, make a bag of lunch instead of eating out with your friends all the time. You can afford it, but save that money. Don't get so reckless with it. Because I
Uh,
wish I would have been rich if I just saved my money. So old man
that's
Ted
that.
talking.
So who actually gave you that advice, or was that something you just kind of figured out on your own?
This is something I learned. Because the thing is, I look when I got married, and I would hang out with my wife and stuff. I just things would pop in my head. I would start telling her my story. And I think one of my favorite things was my mom came to visit me. And one of the peak of years, I was working like hand over fist, and my job just wrapped. And my mom came to visit me in California. I had to go to the bank and deposit one of my checks. So, and my mom, I get the pay stub of the receipt, and my mom was looking at it. She goes, turned to me, says, "You have $11,000 in your checking account." And I said, "Yeah, I know." Like, and I think back about that. Like, I did have like at that point, I had $11,000 in my checking account. Was it in savings? Did I put it in investment in something? No, it just sat in my account and I just burned through it like a drunken sailor. It was like, it it was like, and when I think back, and the reason it stuck with me because my mom said that to me. I didn't see it. She looked at it and said, like, "Holy cow!" I know there's a sense of pride to my mother. She's like, "Holy cow!" Like my son's doing well, but not well enough to hang on to it or to put in savings. And so, but and I lived like like a crazy man in the sense of what in the industry, what we do, and this is how you were wired is that you would work and then the job would be over and you had to like immediately start hustling for looking for another job because you're an independent contractor. So when the job was over, you're basically unemployed. So you're not making
Mhm.
money. You're just every day you're spending money. A day you're not working and you're unemployed means you're just burning through money, not making it. So when the job's over, I just think back about my youth. Like I look like, my God, I could have put that money in something. I could have put it in savings and I could have been like, put myself on a budget. Like there's all these things I could have done, like give myself a weekly allowance of allowing my only to spend so much. Like in this economy right now, it's just, it couldn't be more prevalent about saving money. When you have a ton of money, you get a sense of comfortable and freedom. But man, I'm telling you, just save it and be thrifty. My hobbies I love because they're inexpensive. Like what I do right now, so now that I'm not working, all I'm focusing on is taking care of my family and making stuff in my house with foam and stuff I already have on my shelves right now. I don't have to buy anything. Got stuff right here. So I can't wait just to sit down and start making something without spending so much money doing it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Before we really wrap up, let's talk a little bit about your channel that you've
yes,
started. Yeah,
yes.
tell us a little bit about that. And when did you actually start that?
I started that almost 10 years ago. I was working at the prop house and this is when I I started learning. I mean, I loved cosplay. I didn't know what it was. It was just costume making. When I was a kid, I always tell people I'm sold. I knew I was making stuff before the word cosplay existed. We just called it costuming, you know. And
Hmm.
so when I was making stuff and building things, I saw YouTube channels like, oh, this guy Bill Duran, and I started watching his videos, and my mind was blown. But there was stuff he was doing that I'm like, hey, there's an easier way of doing this and do that. And like, um, so I thought, something I want to try this YouTube thing. And the biggest struggle for me when I first started is to get verified to become partner. And the only way to get partnered on YouTube is you got to reach 100,000 subscribers. And that seemed almost impossible. Like, oh my God. Okay. So when I started putting out videos. And the thing that I learned from my friend Bill Drain was he goes, just put videos out consistently. Do it weekly or bi-weekly, but whatever you do it consistently. So I did. And that's how I started my channel. And once I hit that 100,000 subscribers, it's like, oh my God, I got a plaque in the mail. I was legitimized and I could start making money from YouTube. They could start giving me ad revenue, sponsorships and things like that. So, but it was just fun doing stuff and teaching people. And I think the biggest thing that really was the turning point for me was after a couple of years doing the YouTube channel, I got an email from a con in Germany. They said, "Hey, we'd love you to come out." I'm like, "Oh my God, really?" And they said, "Yeah." So I had to go out and get a passport, all this stuff. And so they were going to basically foot the bill. They're going to fly me to Germany, give me a hotel for a weekend, and have me just sit at my booth and talk to people. I was like, why? I'm just a guy making YouTubes. And so it made me realize that my stuff was making an impact, that people were seeing it. And I was really known well in Germany. So I'm like, holy crap. And so I got all packed up and went there. And that's where I met in person Yaya Han, like the woman I knew on MySpace. It's like, there she was. So I was like, oh my God, there she is. So I was very cool to like, oh my God, Yaya Han. So I did my best not to fangirl on her too much. And I just said, I'm a huge fan, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And she said, what did you, what was your a fee that you asked for people? Did you have an appearance fee? And I said, excuse me? And she sat me down. I will never forget this. And she said, Ted, when I first started, people would fly me all over the globe and they would like give me hotel rooms and, and give me like, like a paid weekend to go to these countries. And she goes, you have to understand that they're putting your face and image on a website and they're selling tickets to the event. People are coming to this event because of you and your face on it. She goes, that has value. Don't undersell yourself. So you need to set yourself an appearance fee of what it costs. How much is it for your time to have a weekend away from your family? Like, how much does that cost you? Holy crap, she's absolutely right. So Yaya honed me up because that was my last of my free conventions I ever did. And she told me, she's like, look, the people that used to bring you out for free, they might disappear, but new people will pop up and pay for it. So don't threat, but start asking for an appearance fee. And to this day, I always give her credit for that. And so I did that and brought value. And I started my YouTube channel and I got on Twitch and making videos. And I won't lie that my videos dropped off. The way algorithms are set up, you're supposed to put up content like constantly. And I know that Bill Duran used to do it every week. And it got to a point that caught up with him. He had to stop doing it because it's not humanly possible for what we do. Like people who just do makeup or talk or tell stories about what they had for dinner, you can do that weekly or daily, that's fine. But doing something as in-depth as what we do and doing creative, making videos, making content, building something takes time. So we both kind of like realized our lives are important. So now we put videos out, but we put out quality videos opposed to a bunch of like fast, cheap ones. So, but again, yeah, the YouTube channel changed my life. It really did. And I can't thank the cosplay community enough because if it wasn't for them coming and enjoying it, I wouldn't do it. So yeah, I love it. It was a lifeline for me. I love my YouTube channel. I love my fan base and I love doing it. So yeah, love my channel. The Evil Ted channel.
That's great.
So Ted, following up on that, since we're about to wrap, can you tell people where they can find out about Evil Ted and the Evil Ted channel?
Fantastic. You guys can go to my website, eviltedsmith.com. There's links for my YouTube channel, my Instagram, and my I think I'm gonna add Blue Sky. There's some things, it's so many, social media's changing so much. I keep changing things around, but I do have a Blue Sky and I'm also going to be on Red Note. It's the Chinese app, which is fun. And, my mission is to try to find the cosplay community in China so I can start chatting with those guys because here's my master plan. I'm going to try to go to a Chinese
Your
con.
evil plan. Sorry.
Yeah, my evil plan is I would love that's thank you. My evil plan is to get a fan base, get people educated about who I am, and go to China, which would be awesome. I would love to go to China for a con. But anyway, oh yeah, because I've been to Germany. I've been to Germany like 3 times. I've been to Canada twice. No, I think Canada 3 times. And I'm getting ready to go to Canada again. Oh, really quickly, shout out! I'm going to GamesCon Canada. That's in June, and I'm also going to St. Peter Con in Florida, and that's in March. If you guys want to get more details, you can go to my website, it has all the info and stuff like that. Also, I sell merch, I have t-shirts, and I have a Facebook group called Evil Ted's Foam Fanatics. It's a page I created for makers. There are people who are novice who are really are like want to get into cosplay, but they're very nervous or don't know anything. It's a great community of people who share techniques and tips. And so if you guys are new to cosplay, but when you join, I have 2 questions. I ask you just answer the 2 questions, and then you're in the group. It's a great friendly community of makers out there.
Yeah, I have to really commend your dedication to, to helping others build on their, on their passions and their, and their creative spark. I think it's
Well, thank
wonderful
you.
what you were doing. And we need more people that are willing to, to show other people the way. I-
Right. Agreed. Agreed.
Janet, I'm happy to show people how not to podcast. Oh, that's a side issue.
Oh, how
Learn
dare
from the
you.
spaceman's mistake.
That goes back to, we cringe at looking at the first episodes. We
Guys,
uh,
I can't even watch my first ones. I tell you, it's the
yeah,
same thing.
yeah.
All right, well, Halfling, why don't you lead us out?
Well, we will make sure that we get all your contact stuff in the show notes for sure.
Oh, thank you.
So what's next for you though? What's the next big thing?
Next big thing. It's always funny. People always like, I just wrapped on a project, and I want to talk about it so bad, but I can't. But I can give you this much: that it's a Netflix series.
Okay.
It's going to be on Netflix, so it's
Uh-huh.
so it won't be probably till next year. But when it does come out, I've been
Okay.
taking tons of pictures, and I'll be able to post about it when. My next big thing is to clean up my shop. It's a disaster, and I'm a big fan of Fallout, the game Fallout, and they've made the Amazon series, which is great. They're shooting the 2nd season right now in Los Angeles. And so in the game, my favorite villains are these creatures called feral ghouls. If you're playing the video game and you walk around, there's these rabid people, and there's different types of ghouls. There's ghouls and there's feral ghoul. The feral ghouls, the crazy ones that attack you. And so I'm going to make a feral ghoul costume. Because not a lot of people dress as feral ghouls. People like dress up as like wastelanders and like characters from the game, but nobody's done a feral ghoul. And I thought that's what I want to do. So I'm going to make a feral ghoul. I'm going to base the feral ghoul costume more on the video game, not the TV show. The TV show, they're really elaborate. They're great makeup on these actors, but I'm going to make kind of more of a video game version of the one from the game. So that's what's coming up next. As a matter of fact, I'll be streaming that on my YouTube channel. I do a live stream every Sunday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you guys out there want to see me or talk to me after hearing this podcast, you can hop on eviltedsmith.com and join my live streams on Sunday at 9 a.m. PST.
Yes, you all should do that. Definitely.
Hey, we could log in and harass Ted.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Please do. That'd be fun. Please do.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We have had an absolute blast. It has been wonderful to talk to you, and to
Oh,
know
thank you.
that to know that you're doing okay out there. With all the fires that
Oof.
we're all
Yes.
that we're all hearing about, and hoping that you and your family stay that way, and that we keep everybody in our hearts and minds thinking about all the devastation out there. It's truly tragic. So
Yeah.
we just continue to be safe out there.
Thank you so much.
But again, we really do appreciate you taking the time to join us today. It has just been a blast. You're
Thank
wonderful
you.
to talk to.
And also don't get rid of your cat. Give your cat a chance.
I'm going to write her a performance improvement plan, and
Okay, there you go.
we'll see how she does. We'll see how she does.
All right, fair enough.
All right, everyone. Well, we want to thank all our listeners for tuning in today, and we hope that you've enjoyed and become inspired by today's guest, Evil Ted Smith.
That's me. Thank you, guys.
We want to give everyone who listens a huge shout out and thank you for joining us. And this is the Spaceman for the Halfling and the Spaceman podcast. Over and out.